I run an ensemble called the Curiosity Cabinet, which was founded in 2009. We are a very close knit group of collaborators, and I suppose I should probably explain the name the Curiosity Cabinet. It's a sort of turn of the century piece of furniture in which to hold curiosities or objects that you collect during bits and pieces of travel and excursions and whatnot. And the collaborators that I work with are, in a sense, curiosities that are within this cabinet. Our interdisciplinary aspect of art making is really important to what we do. We always try to mix music with some other medium, whether it be film or theater or animation or costuming or set design, a great variety of things. And part of this is to encourage audience participation, which is so important and often overlooked in new music sometimes. So that's a goal of the ensemble, and it ties into the goal also of Composers Now, which is to increase audience participation in something that we as composers who are currently living in New York and beyond, of the importance of the audience member, and the idea of really reaching out and speaking to people, not just creating things in the abstract. So I guess there's a bit of that to it. We'll be doing a work of mine for the ensemble, really written very, very, very tailored for the Curiosity Cabinet on a Composers Now concert, which will be at the CUNY Graduate Center in our recital hall, Alabash, and will feature other works by Graduate Center composers. When did I realize I was a composer? I was 16, and I had the opportunity to take a music theory class, and one of the not first assignments that we had was to write a fugue. And wow, tall order for someone who's 16 to try to write a fugue. So of course you study a bunch of fugues. The Little Fugue in G minor probably still is my favorite. And I studied it and tried to make my own fugue, and failed at it miserably. But rather than be discouraged, I scrapped the whole thing and thought, let me try this again. And interesting as the formula is to try to write a fugue, I still didn't like my second attempt. And it became this obsession with how to figure out a puzzle in a way. And that's initially really what got me into composing, was finding a question that kept being asked but rephrased in different ways, but trying to find new ways of answering it. And at this point, I write out of complete necessity. I don't think I even have a choice about it anymore. It's the idea of wanting to be known, I guess, and known in a way that's beyond just words, but integrated into gestures and sounds, but specifically sounds that are created for the people to make them. So I think that must be in part why I write. Where did these questions come from? I don't know. They come from everyday occurrences. I, at the moment, am interested in the transparency of narratives and whether we experience things as unique individuals or whether there are templates in which we form our experiences too. So these questions are mixed and many and very global, and gosh, they're even so hard to sort of speak about, I guess. But I guess that's the point, is to try to figure out exactly what it is these questions are and exactly how to answer them. Composing doesn't always happen at the most convenient times. Sometimes inspiration will strike when I'm on the subway and I see two people who are non-verbally communicating with one another. There's a lot of people watching that happens in the city, and I hope no one finds offense to that. I think everyone kind of engages in it in some way. but I'm often in transit and inspired by the rhythms that I hear around me, or those bits of nonverbal communications, those sparks that you see that you wonder if your life is much different and how you would translate that moment into music. At the moment, I try to work away from the computer initially when conceptualizing about a piece. At the moment, I happen to have a vibraphone in my possession, so in terms of picking pitch materials, I've been really hands-on in that aspect of things, and feeling space between notes, but physically with my hands. So, yeah, that's where I sometimes create some elements of pitch. When I work on a piece of music, starting is the hardest part, of course. So it's rather indulgent. I'll just start anywhere. And more often than not, I won't start at the very, very beginning of a piece, but realize that I've started maybe a third of the way through, and it's about, sometimes I get so excited about everything I could possibly want to say that it just comes out in one large chunk, and it's about trying to find a way to pull the bits and pieces out of that chunk and to weave it into something that really comes more naturally into being and sometimes dissolves into those bits and fragments again. My musicians constantly surprise me, which is exactly why I work with them. We were working on an opera at some point, and there was this very intimate moment between the lead tenor and the soprano, and they're in a ballroom scene, and they're dancing in a habanera together. And a very riff-based motive underneath it, nothing too complicated, but we weren't quite getting the feeling of it. So in rehearsal, I just, asked the double basses to vamp and gave them some changes and actually asked them to improvise. And the things that they came up with on the spot to sort of get the feeling of the scene across really inspired something in the singers that was, it was magic. And we ended up actually writing it into the piece after that point. It was just so natural, and it's the things that I don't necessarily think about that they infer from what I've given them that make the act of actually collaborating so exciting. On the other side of the spectrum, just dealing with so many personalities in one room can be frustrating sometimes when you're dealing with multiple interpretations of a piece and maybe the composer's not alive anymore. You want to honor all the feelings and thoughts in a room, and sometimes as the conductor, just being one person, one vehicle for the thoughts of many ends up being somewhat frustrating, and your hands won't often agree with you, and really it's about being at the right headspace at the right time to make some of the best music and leaving maybe things at the door that you don't necessarily want to. But that, separating music and life, and it makes music that much better, but it can also make music that much more difficult to achieve the perfect vision of, I suppose. Kids are probably one of the most fantastic audiences. I love working with kids. They are completely unbridled when it comes to expressing joy about things, and I think that I've really nailed it on the head if I can make a kid stay quiet for a whole performance. And I've had some students of mine bring their children to some of my recitals, and I know I've written a good piece when they won't say anything during it and it's all silent. So I think sometimes it's about the subjects that you take along too as narratives, and I think keeping them fun and fantastical and surreal is a way to engage younger audience members and to making them imagine more and connect the dots in their own way. And non-musical things influence my work so much. This piece that I've spent all of 2013 writing is a set of musical letters, each to a different correspondent, and these people don't know that I've written them musical letters necessarily, but they are greatly influenced by exactly what happens in the time that surrounds the actual conception of the work. So, the beginning of last year I was reading Lolita, which I love the narrator's enthusiasm and sense of obsession, and the way obsession comes through in every aspect of the writing, and that idea of really being obsessed with something showed up in my writing. So I can't separate the things that I read from the things that I end up writing. Even the movies that I view to some extent, or you know, going out to a bar, having drinks with a friend. It's the conversations that you engage in, these questions that are asked in conversation, they appear everywhere. So I don't even know if I even answered the question. I get so caught up in things sometimes. Like this interview may somehow surface in what I write tonight, tomorrow, the next day. Just the idea of attempting to answer these things lead me to make the music that I write.